Hey, dual credit friends. Okay, so here's kind of a quick rundown on the stories that I'm going to have you read for this monsters section, just to hopefully help you make some sense of them. So first one we got is this Lucis Natura. So obviously this is like kind of a classic monster story, and it plays off elements that are part of the movie Frankenstein. Which, if you ever seen that movie, that's it's drastically different than the book. In the book, Victor Frankenstein is actually the doctor, and then he creates this creature who's not just like this thing running around. The creature is actually fully sentient and goes through a process of like becoming educated and reading novels and reads a bunch of like Greek classics and end up arguing about the responsibility that a creator has to its creature. That's the book. So if you've ever seen that movie, though, there's like this kind of like there's this scene in a windmill where they're like burning the thing and stuff like that. So Lucis Natura kind of plays off of that. She's supposed to be kind of like this werewolfy sort of creature. And yeah, so that one's pretty self-explanatory though. The last scene there where she like she basically just wants to be loved, but then this last scene there where she ends up with a dress on. I'm kind of curious what you guys make of that. Like it could be like almost like a wedding thing. She puts on this dress to like meet the villagers when they come out. So like what's going on there? Is that like whom or what is she marrying? St. Lucy's Home for Girls Raised by Wolves. This is one of my favorite stories 'cause I just think it's so freaking bizarre. It's like basically fantastic, not in like fantastic as in like fantasy, and it's also fantastic as in like really good. So this one basically kind of the general premise here. It starts out just kind of throws you in. So what's happening is you've got a kind of alternate universe where there are girls who are born to werewolf parents, but the girls are not actually werewolves. They're like just regular girls. So they get collected by these Jesuit nuns and then the Jesuit nuns is like Catholic nuns, right? So the Catholic nuns then like raise these girls to be members of society. And like that's the idea. So this follows these werewolf children as they enter this like convent to become normalized as humans. So the question is like, who are the actual monsters here? Because you got a drastically different culture in the werewolves, and like they have their own sense of right and wrong. And then you've got these Jesuit nuns, and they have their own sense of right and wrong. So in the end, like, are the girls better off? That's kind of like it's an interesting play there. So I think it's also a really good picture of like how human children, especially girls, behave in high school, because it's like it's kind of gnarly, like this idea of a pack and like alpha female and stuff like that. Not the part where they're actually like werewolves and stuff like that. But I don't know, it's kind of interesting. They've got some interpersonal conflicts that I think are kind of interesting there. And then this last one, the short one in this little section here, the monster, Toby Litt's the monster. This one confuses the heck out of people. But like you've seen, hopefully, the lecture on monstrosity, what makes a monster a monster. So Toby Litt wrote a story about a monster. So like look at the form and function and structure of this story. There are no paragraphs at all. Why? Right? What is he saying about the nature of monstrosity through the vehicle of this story is kind of the question I'd have for you there. And then also like what is this monster? Like you want to define it, but again, remember like monsters have to exist in a place of ignorance. So it's really hard to have a monster story where it's like following the monster as the protagonist because then you learn things about the protagonist and then it's like you can't be a monster then. It's hard for it to be a monster. So yeah, and then this last line of this story, the monster had no story unless being a monster is story enough. Why would he end it that way? Curious what you guys think. Okay, and then I've got you reading two more, which are in a different section. They're not in the monsters section of your book, but I think they're pretty good examples of monster stories. So the first one is the yellow wallpaper, and that is on page 479. And that's like kind of context for that. Women in the turn of the century, right? They didn't have a whole lot of rights, and like your only options if you get divorced is to like go be if you're divorced, you probably can't even be a school teacher, but you could be like a prostitute or a secretary, and that's pretty much it. So like this yellow wallpaper thing, they had really gnarly medical things that they do to women when they were pregnant. So and then also like they basically just thought women in general had like weak nerves and they would pass out all the time. So they do all kinds of weird stuff. So this rest cure, which is the main character in the yellow wallpaper, is being given a rest cure, which means she's like sickly. And so in order to fix her, they're going to make her rest. So she can't leave her room. She's supposed to just lie there all day. But she wants to write, but her husband doesn't want to let her, and he's actually a physician. So it's kind of like her diary as she spirals into darkness with this rest cure. So like if you came across her in the middle of her episode, you'd probably think like she's a monster. But then like who's actually the monster here? Um, you tell me. And then Jury of Her Peers. It's a murder story, murder mystery. Uh, this woman strangles her husband basically while he's sleeping. So she's like killed an unarmed man. Is she a monster or not? Or is he a monster? Are all men monsters? Okay, so hopefully that kind of gives you a background on these stories. And again, if you have questions, shoot me an email. I'd love to talk.